by how much you have committed yourself to Islam.
Are you kidding? It's awesome. I even started wearing leather sandals with way too long toenails. See how the big ones are getting yellow?
Ah, yes, very Muslim.
Allahu Akbar, it says here terms and conditions apply. One small penalty for apostasy, leave and you must die. There's no compulsion in religion, but revoking your shahada gets you crucifixion. You've done it now.
So anyway, right, music, yeah, is fucking haram. You get me?
Hi guys, what's up YouTube family? Ian and just checking back in. Today, before we get into the topic, I just want to say something really quickly here. So I want to say something really quickly here, guys. I hear the same old dumb recycled arguments how the Bible isn't in the original language and why it wasn't in Aramaic, the language Jesus spoke. Let's just look at something logically here really quickly. We know the Jews spoke Hebrew. However, in Alexandria, way before Jesus' birth, this city had a massive Jewish population. So Ptolemy Philadelphus had such a large Jewish population in Alexandria that couldn't speak Hebrew and only spoke Greek. So they didn't know how to read their holy texts. So he decided to commission a Greek translation of the Old Testament so that the Greek-speaking Jews living in Alexandria would be able to access their holy texts. So he got 70-something rabbis, we don't know the exact number, and he made the Septuagint, or Septuagint, however you pronounce it. He made 70 rabbis translate the Old Testament so that it could weed out bias and error, and they would merge the 70 translations into one so they can get an accurate translation. We have since found the Dead Sea Scrolls, which are way older than the Septuagint by I don't know how much, maybe 200-300 years. But when we look at the original Old Testament material that was in Hebrew and compare them, we have an amazing translation. So in other words, they pulled it off. So the Bible being written in Greek is because the major world language at the time was Greek. So this idea that something being translated corrupts the message is a lie and foolish. Let's think about this. The Muslims say that the Injil or the Gospels are gone and corrupted, and Muhammad had the real ones revealed to him. So here when it says, in this hadith specifically, that Waraka used to write the Gospels as much as Allah willed it. So if the Injil or the Gospels were lost and corrupted, what in the world was this jackass writing? Where did he get a copy of the real Injil from if Muhammad said it was lost? See how Muhammad is stupid, guys? I told you he was retarded. When Muhammad married Khadijah, for 15 years, Waraka was writing the Gospels, and before Muhammad, he was writing it too. So somehow, guys, in between the time of Muhammad's marriage and by the time he gets quote-unquote revelations, the Injil was lost up until his first choke session with Jibreel. So, I don't know. This logically don't make no sense. This is just a whole bunch of dumbness. And according to chapter 29, verse 46, guys, Allah is telling Muslims to not argue with Christians and what was revealed to the Christians because it is true. And their God is Muhammad's God, and they fully submit. So Jesus is Muhammad's God. So they can't run from it, guys. It's written here, and they're going to try to do some straw man argument, but nonetheless, it's just all BS. You all know this is the month of Ramadan, aka the holy fasting month, right? Now, this month, basically, according to Muslims, is where the devil is locked away. He's chained up, right? So therefore, any evil that's being done cannot be blamed on the devil. It means that the person just is not a good person, right? So let's just put this logically really quickly. We all saw the news, and we see the terror attacks that happened. Sad. May God bless these lives, and I hope they're at peace. And it's such a sad event. But guys, let's look at this logically. So if the devil is locked away in the month of Ramadan, and these people committed acts of terror in the name of religion, or specifically in the name of Allah, following Muhammad's commandments, doesn't that prove that Islam is more evil than the devil? If the devil is locked away and chained away, doesn't that mean that Islam forces people to do evil because of Muhammad. So I don't know, guys. Muslims need to think about this, and you need to leave the cult and realize Jesus is the way, truth, and the life. Guys, we already spoke about this, right, in the previous video about Muhammad's death and everything that happened to him. But let's just look at this really quickly, right? Let's just look at this on a logical perspective too. So Muhammad died by poisoning, right? Abu Bakr died of a sickness 2 years after his reign. Umar ibn Khattab died by assassination from his wounds. Ali was struck in the back of his head with a poisoned sword whilst praying the holy words of Allah. Uthman died in his house by assassination whilst reading the Quran. What does this tell us, guys? That the famous 4 holy men of Allah's prophecy had a disgraceful, dishonorable death. Allah lied that he would protect Muhammad, proving him a liar and a false prophet. And the death of the remaining caliphs proved that Allah didn't even care to protect these bastards. So when Muslims are chanting and trying to give valor and nice comments to these fools, no, history proves that they were nothing but wicked people. And we all know that wickedness eventually gets settled by the score of karma. You know, it's hilarious, guys. And guys, this silly old retarded story that we hear from the biography that a whole bunch of Muslims cheer and go crazy about, you know, the story of Rukana and Muhammad. Guys, this is insane. This guy is literally saying that the best part of him is not beating the strong man, which we already said is nothing more than a copy of the David and Goliath story. This guy is literally saying my ultimate power, where I can show you why you need to believe in Allah, is that I have the ability to tell that tree to come over here. So Muhammad basically tells the tree, yo, come over here. The tree walks over to him and says, what's up, Muhammad? And then the tree goes back into place. He makes the tree walk back into place. And Rukana's like, wow, I've never seen such sorcery. No one could ever compete with the sorcerers of our tribe. So here you have Muhammad doing black magic, guys. They're admitting to doing black magic. And now all of a sudden Muhammad had powers. Like, what? So not only is he retarded, and in the hadith it says here that no wonder Muhammad said this, that the last hour won't come until every Jew is finished, and that if they're hiding behind a tree or a rock, that the tree or rock will start talking and then betray the Jews so the Muslims can go attack them and annihilate them. This is probably where he got it from. Muhammad had superpowers and shit. So guys, today's topic is about where Muhammad would get information about things like medicine or astronomy to create verses for the Quran. The scientific miracles of the Quran have been visited by many scholars and apologists already. They have debunked this topic numerous times, so we aren't going to be redundant here. The main part of the topic today is for us to explore how Muhammad and the Arab scribes would get this information to input it.
The argument of scientific miracles is debunked. It is debunked. And guess what? We don't even need it.
You see, guys, the biggest problem with the Islamic narrative is that the biography about Muhammad comes 200 years after his death. And the author Ibn Hisham said he omitted or has taken stuff out from the Ibn Ishaq's version because it was disgraceful to Islam and would cause stress among Muslims. Look here. Therefore, besides the historical gap between Muhammad's death and his biography, we get confirmation that the history of Muhammad has been tampered with. So if we are using historical facts and drawing a conclusion, Muslims cannot be quick to disregard what we are saying, because the whole story of Islam has holes, contradictions, and a big gap in the historical documents. So from an academic perspective, we can't just go with faith and assume everything is true. We must investigate. Let's first do a quick recap from the previous video. So we know that the secretary of Muhammad, Zayd ibn Thabit, was the one who compiled the Quran after Muhammad's death. Now this hadith here tells us that Zayd would learn Hebrew in 2 weeks, and in about 3 weeks he learned Syriac. Muhammad was retarded, So he couldn't really understand anything. And even the companions that memorized the whole Quran, we learned they were retarded as well. For example, in 624, 14 years after the first revelation Muhammad got, he gets some slaves after winning the Battle of Badr to teach his crew of illiterates. This is why I said none of these dummies remembered the Quran, and if they had the job to write it down, they wouldn't. They couldn't, because they couldn't read or write. So Zayd is one of the people who taught. Zayd was one of the people who were taught by the slaves, and basically we're told that he becomes like a PhD professor in 3 weeks, right? Figuratively. But he becomes super smart, right? Apart from the revelations that Zayd would write on parchment, stones, leaves, and whatever he could find, he wrote letters to kings, tribe leaders, and wrote treaties. So he was super important to Muhammad, and super important to the establishment of a written Quran and Muhammad's diplomatic operations. Now, guys, you would think, since Muhammad was such a good thief, by robbing caravans so much, he would at least spend some money on some quality animal skins and make the Holy Quran. Animal skins were expensive, but he had the money. The Quran was so worthless, they wrote it on stones, bones, and even leaves. Muhammad cared more about money, wives, and slaves than the Quran, because if he would have invested in some quality paper and had Zayd write it down and keep it in a treasure chest, they would have preserved copies. Zayd, since he was the main one to collect the fragmented verses, would write the Quran, meaning he would polish whatever he can that Muhammad was saying, because, Muhammad was illiterate, so no one really understood what the hell he was saying, right? The fairy tales tell us that the revelations came clean, but we know if somebody's illiterate, they're pronouncing shit completely wrong. Anyways, before the time of Zayd coming into Muhammad's journey, Muhammad used to hear stories and steal as much as he could to make up verses. We did a previous video about that. Basically, guys, the Ghassanids, they were basically like the king of the Arabs, right? They controlled the border of Arabia, and they were Christians, right? They were kind of like heretics. They were like heretical Christians. So they would control the trade route from Syria all the way to Yemen. Now the Ghassanids was like basically the frontline defense, and they had a good relationship with the Romans. Even though the Romans wasn't really messing with them because they were heretics, but nonetheless, the Ghassanids would be able to have, would be in control of transporting valuable scrolls, knowledge, valuable items, whatever, right? Now, trade would happen from Yemen to Syria all the time and into Egypt as well. So if someone wanted a translation of Greek knowledge, they would have to find a rich person or a relation. So a tiny fraction of the Arabs had access to outsider knowledge per se. Muhammad, being wealthy from Khadijah's empire, makes him into this circle of knowledgeable people. So it wasn't a problem if he wanted something. Money wasn't a problem. He could have just paid for a caravan to come up and down and transport it whatever he wanted to. He could have been around a circle of people that knew what they were talking about. Like, this is because he had money, position, and power, right? Now, Alexandria, the great majestic city of trade and intellectualism, would hold a lot of knowledge and medicine, thought, and astronomy. Knowledge would find its way from here into Syria and then into the Arab world. Physicians from Arabia would travel into Syria to learn from the direct physical sources. So besides Muhammad learning things from this way, the authors of the Quran, who would polish, rework, and edit the final piece, would have absorbed a vast amount of knowledge from conquering their counterparts. This is the most important part, guys. Focus on these dates. This is the main part of today's conversation. Muhammad died in 632, and in 638, just 6 years, the Arabs conquer a very important piece of property. Probably the most important piece of property. It's called the Academy in Gondeshapur. So before we explore the academy in Gondeshapur, we have to go back like 1,000 years and look into something called the Great Library in Alexandria. So 1,000 years ago, not from our date, but 1,000 years ago from the time of Muhammad, one of the Greeks who went with Alexander the Great and conquered the Persians was named Ptolemy. Now Ptolemy goes and carves Egypt out of this Greek empire when Alexander the Great dies, because he thought Egypt was the best piece of real estate in Alexander's empire. Then he founded the Great Library, and the idea behind the Great Library is that it'll be the world's repository for information. What they're going to do is they're going to bring books from every society, every culture, and keep a copy. Then they will use this knowledge to invent things. The Great Library was a museum for all the latest advanced tech in ancient times, and there was no such thing as a copyright. The reason was because once you go to Alexandria and visit the library, see the advanced tech, you were supposed to build on it, then bring your improvements back there so that the next generation of improvements could be made. At its height, the Great Library may have reached as many as 1 million books. Some people say 400k, 500k books, but the historians say 1 million is the best bet. Now guys, when the library, the Great Library, is burnt by Caesar in 48 BC, Cleopatra in Egypt basically secures a bunch of knowledge. The second time the library is burnt in 380 to 400 by a Christian bishop because it was considered pagan, a fraction of the knowledge was gone again. The third time the library is being burnt, monks decide to recover it, and they do it at the Academy of Athens. But when they do this at the Academy of Athens, the academy becomes banned by Emperor Justinian in 529. Justinian. The emperor basically was like, yo, we got rid of the Great Library, so we don't need a new one. So they grab all their books, then jump on a ship into Syria. They cross Syria and get to what would roughly be the Iraq-Syria border today. It was roughly where the Roman-Persian border was. Excited? And they go, yeah, but we don't only want asylum for us, we want it for our books. And the Persians get excited as well, and they go, yeah, bring everything that you have. And the Christian monks, they basically say, hey, look, we're bringing everything. And the Persians, they get so excited, and guess what they do? They take them to Gondeshapur. Now when they take them to Gondeshapur, they take all the books and they merge them together. So now when the Persians and the Romans were fighting each other, the Persians couldn't get knowledge that the Romans had, so they never got the books. Now when the Great Library was created, the Persians got jealous of it, and they tried to basically create their own version of it. That's how the academy originally was created. So thank God he did that, because whilst the Great Library was being destroyed, there was this substitute, right? Now anyways, once they get into Gondeshapur, the Emperor Khosrau is the guy who allows all these books to come together, and basically the Academy and Gondeshapur now have all of these Roman, Greek, Egyptian, Chinese, Persian, and Indian works, and it kind of recovered the loss of the Great Library a little bit. Now when the Muslims go and conquer Alexandria in 640, and Umar is retarded, as we mentioned before, so he thinks the knowledge here contradicts the Quranic teachings, so he basically rejects it, and they start burning shit too. However, guys, as we mentioned before, the Arabs walked into Gondeshapur on the right of the map after conquering it in 638. They turn to the Persians and they go, yo, what's that? The Persians go, it's an academy. The Arabs go, cool, what is it? And they go, it's a repository of all the knowledge of the world that we know of. And the Arabs go, show us. And the Persians is like, what choice do we got? We just lost to them. The Arabs say, teach us. And the Persians are like, what choice do we have? While it doesn't happen right away that the general population can learn from this knowledge, it tells us that between 638 and 652, which is the creation of the Uthmanic Quran, the Arabs had 14 years to learn a lot of things. So the upper echelon of the Arab society would be able to access this whole wealth of knowledge and be able to go back and forth and kind of like update, rework, edit, and polish. Now, remember, we're not even counting the fact that this is after Muhammad's death. Remember, before Muhammad's death, Muhammad would learn Greek knowledge from Greek knowledge about medicine and all kind of things to Syriac Christian stories by using his money and influence, right? So we're not even counting the fact that he had access to all that stuff. We're just talking about this key moment in time. So remember, guys, Hafsa is Muhammad's wife, right? The daughter of Umar. Now, when Muhammad dies, and they create this whole one original Quranic copy, that copy is passed to Hafsa. Now, Hafsa's original Quranic manuscript was burnt, meaning the evidence to cross-check what was previously written when Uthman went ahead and made his uniform version is gone. So we can never really conclude when the original Quran, not when, but what the original Quran had written in it, right? They already lost a bunch of verses at the Battle of Yamama. Then, guys, we don't have one Quran from the year 632 to the year 700 with 114 surahs, 6,236 verses to prove anything was really finalized at that time. The Muslims say it doesn't matter. We memorized it, which is stupid because the only way to memorize it is by reading and teaching a book to the next group of quote-unquote transmitters. It just sounds retarded that this is why the story is a pure... It just sounds retarded. This is why the story is a pure fabrication made by the later caliphates to tweak the Muhammad story to make it fit well with their empire. Anyways, guys, 100 years later after the knowledge from the Academy, the Abbasid Empire in 750s moved the intellectual capital to Baghdad and named it the House of Wisdom. The function of the House of Wisdom was to be a place for the preservation of rare books and poetry. Nonetheless, guys, we can see historically how the Arabs, between all this Quranic creation, insertions, rewrites, and tapings, would assemble the Great Quran. The Quran, which was created by Muhammad, most likely was tweaked and reworked and became a final product by one of the caliphs. Get yourself this book, guys. I don't know if you can see it very well, right? We're not being endorsed to sell this book. We're just saying, if you would like, get it. Bought it after seeing a scholar speak about it. The Muslims hate this book and claim the PhD author, Daniel Brubaker, is a liar because he's funded by Christians. Next time, I'll show some key pictures of it for those of you who don't want to purchase it. But it's basically a book where he analyzed a whole bunch of manuscripts that contradict the Uthmanic version of the Quran, aka what they have today. And I wouldn't even call it the Uthmanic Quran. I would just call it the Hafs version, right? Which just comes from the popularity by the Ottomans and the Egyptians and the Saudi Arabians adopted it after. But nonetheless, the book just has a whole bunch of proof where you can see all of these insertions, tape marks, rewrites, scribbles, scrabbles, and all that kind of stuff like that. So when they talk about it was preserved, and it's all BS, bro. Just all BS, guys. But anyways, let's get back to the topic. Now, Muhammad was retarded, as we know. So he said that the semen from men came from the backbone and between the ribs, right? And he said bones formed before flesh, when we know muscle and cartilage form simultaneously. Then the cartilage is replaced by bones after. So we know he made yet another miracle wrong. The point in bringing these up, these two miracles, is because these verses in the Quran reflect the widespread contemporary view at the time that semen is the material from which the embryo is initially formed, as taught by Hippocrates, or Hippocrates, however you say it, and Galen. Galen, guys, was a famous 2nd century physician who made many medical breakthroughs and believed in Hippocrates, Plato, Aristotle, etc. Now, Galen wasn't allowed to dissect humans, but animals. So things he said about human biology and embryology, he got wrong for this reason, because he would confuse certain things with animals and humans. The works of Galen circulated throughout the Roman Empire, then to Syria and Arabia by the 6th century. A famous physician named Al-Harith ibn Qalada was a companion of Muhammad and studied Galen, Aristotle, and medicine. He even went up north to Gondeshapur to study these things. So Muhammad had an extensive number of resources at his disposal to attain information to conjure up verses from the made-up Allah. You guys know with a simple Google search and reading, you can see all the scientific errors in the Quran. Stupid things like chapter 16 verse 8, where Allah and to show, but horses were domesticated by humans. They were never able to be used before that period, thousands of years ago. They were wild. Plus, Allah claimed that he made the horse when the horse actually evolved from a different animal millenniums ago. Like how the dog became man's best friend after domestication, not because Allah made the dog. So guys, hopefully we didn't lose you here today, right? Just to wrap it up really quickly. So basically today we were just trying to pinpoint how historically Muhammad and the Arabs, his scribes, his everyone around him would be able to acquire and consolidate a whole bunch of information and knowledge from the Greeks, Indians, Persians, the Romans, Chinese, and we just wanted you guys to focus like 1,000 years ago, way before Muhammad's time, about this great piece of intellectual prosperity, this monumental type of icon about human intellectualism, which was the Great Library, right? The Great Library was the single most greatest type of creation, and it was housing all of this academic and ambitious activity. And we just showed that how through time, destruction and burning and a rejection of knowledge, it shifted all the way to the Persians, and the Persians would be the one that would basically save a portion of it, and coincidentally the Arabs would conquer this piece of property, which would be the most important piece of property. And from this piece of property, they would learn all the things they possibly could have. And we showed like basically key figures, just like how Muhammad's companion, who would go up to Gondeshapur and study medicine at the time. So he had people around him that were intelligent. Muhammad may have been a retard, but he didn't have dummies around him. He had men with power, position, status, and intelligence, right? And to acquire things was very easy. We showed that clip about the Nabateans. The Nabateans in Petra up there, they had a whole bunch of this gigantic commercial center where things were moving in and out, from olives, from spices, from scrolls, all kind of things. People were translating and writing and selling things, and physicians and teachers, and it was poets, and it was insane, right? And we talked about the Ghassanids, which is basically the ultimate empire over there that was controlling the in and out of the border, because the Bedouin desert bandits, who Muhammad basically started his empire with, would always be up to no good, robbing, raping, stealing. That's all they ever knew. They didn't know how to read and write, just know how to kill, rape, rob, and steal. And basically, as they were coming up and down, the passage of ancient relics and knowledge and everything like that was so easy, but people don't tell it to you like this, right? And besides all the things that he was exposed to that he would use, even though it was inaccurate information, it may be scientifically wrong today, but remember, he's illiterate, right? He's retarded, so he may have interpreted things in the wrong way, or he may have just generalized things in such a way to the best of his ability instead that God told it to him. That's why he killed people and chopped off their heads when they said that he was a storyteller, or these type of things that he was saying was wrong, because he had an ego. He was just pissed off. He didn't like that, right? And nonetheless, at the end of the day, right after his death, he never even once said that he was going to create a Quran, right? Because no one knew when the verses would stop. That's why they never made a book in the first place. They were just writing stuff down, because it just kept coming and coming and coming. Besides the Quran being disorganized, things were coming in random matter, random times. There were times when he didn't hear from God or Jibril, and it was just weird, guys. And at the end of the day, once he died, that was the point where they were like, oh, okay, the verse is going to stop coming, right? So now they decide to make it into a book because it's going to be lost. But he never once said, yo, let's make a book. And that turned the whole thing upside down. Because now when he made a book, it's one thing to say, oh, we all remembered it and we're praying, right? If you have one guy in the front reciting the prayers and we're all following, we're going to learn by listening to him. But at the end of the day, we don't know what he's saying is true or not. And it just caused this whole cross-checking, this and this and that. But at the end of the day, it comes down to power, position, and authority, right? So who's going to be the one to commission it? AKA Uthman, right? He's the caliphate. He wants to be the one to say, this is the right thing, this is the wrong thing. I'm the one that has it right. And there's so many contradictions back and forths. And then it gets to the point where, you know, these key moments where I wanted you guys to focus on, you know, the 6-year gap difference between Muhammad's death and the conquering of Gondeshapur, where all this knowledge was, right? In Gondeshapur, conquering the Academy would be the triggering mechanism to start Arab intellectualism, right? It would be the single most important point in history where the golden age of Islam would start from, because when the Abbasids come 100 years later, they would be able to switch from Gondeshapur to Baghdad, creating the House of Wisdom, and then you get this 500-year prosperity of intellectualism in the Muslim Empire. But nonetheless, guys, the most important thing is that when Muhammad was doing his thing, jihad was the ultimate weapon. The reason he was able to win and do the impossible was because he had men that he promised that the next world is better than this one. That is the only reason why he won, guys, was because he told people, if you die, death is better than life. You see Muhammad Hijab and all these other people chanting it out. Why do you think they don't care about dying? Because he has manipulated people under compulsion to make it believe that at the end of the day, death is better than life. And he lied about everything. And he created this sex paradise, this brothel, rivers with honey, rivers of milk, and houris, and all these type of crazy things. And these people were like, yo, life sucks here in the desert. F it, you know, we're going to just go do what we want to do. We're going to rob, rape, steal, do what we got to do. We're going to follow this guy who says that he knows what he's talking about, and God told him this because the next life is better. He really convinced people that, and that is why he won. That was his secret weapon of why he won, because of jihad. But anyways, nonetheless, guys, hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you learned something today. Stay tuned for next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.